What if the problem isn't that you're unmotivated, but that the version of you trying to be disciplined isn't real? Not fake in a dramatic sense, just unfamiliar, unstable, temporary. Something you visit but never actually become. It usually starts the same way. A random moment of clarity. Maybe late at night. Maybe after watching a video. Maybe after a bad day. You sit there and think, all right, this is it. Tomorrow I'm fixing everything. You imagine waking up early, going for a run, eating better, studying with focus, finally becoming the kind of person who has their life together. And for a day or two, it works. You wake up with intention. You feel slightly in control, slightly proud. But then something small happens. You wake up tired. You check your phone just for a minute. You skip one task. And suddenly, the version of you that felt so clear just disappears. By the end of the week, you're back in the same cycle. Scrolling, delaying, telling yourself you'll restart on Monday. And quietly, in the background, a thought begins to form. Why can't I stay consistent like other people? But here's what's actually happening. You're not failing because you lack motivation. You're failing because you're trying to perform habits that don't match who you believe you are. There's a gap between your actions and your identity. You're trying to act like a disciplined person, but internally you still see yourself as someone who procrastinates, gets distracted, and eventually gives up. And that mismatch creates friction. Not visible friction, but the kind that slowly pulls you back to what feels familiar. The mind doesn't resist hard work as much as it resists inconsistency with identity. If deep down you believe, I'm not someone who sticks to things, then every disciplined action feels temporary, like you're borrowing someone else's personality. That's why motivation feels necessary. Because motivation is what you use when something doesn't feel natural. It's a substitute for identity. And the problem is, motivation fades. It always does. So when it fades, you don't just lose energy, you return to what feels like yourself. The comfortable patterns, the distractions, the habits you've repeated enough times to believe are just who you are. And if this continues, something subtle but serious happens. You stop trusting your own effort. You begin to associate self-improvement with short bursts, followed by collapse. You don't just lose consistency, you lose belief. So even when you try again, there's always a quiet doubt underneath. This probably won't last. And that thought alone is enough to weaken everything you start. But there's another way to look at this. People who seem disciplined don't wake up every day fighting themselves. They're not constantly relying on motivation because they're not trying to act disciplined. They've slowly started to see themselves that way, not in a loud, confident sense, but in a quiet, stable one. They don't think, I need to force myself to focus. They think, this is just what I do. That difference is small, but it changes everything. Because when something becomes part of your identity, it stops feeling optional. It becomes normal. And normal doesn't require motivation. So when you sit there wondering why you can't stay consistent, it's not because you're weak, and it's not because you need more inspiration. It's because you're still trying to operate from an identity that doesn't support the life you want. You're trying to build discipline on top of a self-image that contradicts it. And until that changes, every attempt will feel like effort against yourself. Real change is quieter than most people expect. It doesn't start with intense motivation. It starts with small, repeated actions that slowly rewrite how you see yourself. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually enough that one day you don't feel like you're forcing discipline anymore. You just feel like yourself.